different ways. I would repeal significant portions of that tax bill that help the rich, including what he did with the corporate tax rate, including what he did on international taxation. You add it all up, you got a lot of money that, one, helps pay for that child care, protects that dignity of work, make sure we have a decent retirement.
Hey, instead of always trying to jack up tax rates on everybody else, why don't they talk about reducing middle-class taxes? There's a poll out that shows that about half of Democratic voters would go along with and actually support cutting middle-class taxes. So these quote-unquote Democrats up on the stage, Democratic Socialists, whatever they want to call themselves, they're just, never mind all the stealing, never mind all the corruption, never mind all the cronyism. Oh, the billionaires, the billionaires, the billionaires. Well, the billionaires, some of them don't pay any taxes anyway, so you're going to fiddle around with a rate where they don't even pay anything? This is ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point. They're just pandering to people who, oh my God, you're going to die, you're going to get sick. You need government to take care of you because you're poor and everything. That's what they're trying to do to people. They're trying to lower their self-value so that they're, we can swoop in and be the knight in shining armor that's going to save everybody with all these freebies. That's their whole game plan.
The especially ridiculous part about that is just the fact that.
Oh, your audio went out, Arvin.
She wouldn't have been able to make the wages she made when my parents got divorced. So just because
we heard you for a second.
And get to the same place in terms of beating Donald Trump and taking this on. We are in Ohio. We can win Ohio in the presidency, but only if we unite. We
can win in Ohio.
So fighting against each other.
Ohio is one of the 16 battleground states, and I think Florida, Ohio, I think those are the two biggest ones. There are 14 states that always go Democrat every year, and there are 20 states that always go Republican every year. Hardly any competition anymore. Only 16 states decide the election.
Yeah, it's just, like, when they start talking like that, it's just all a game to them. Like that's how they look at it. Like it's how do we convince people in Ohio to vote for us? What epidemics can we bring up? What problems do they have that we can pretend we care about so we can get Ohio to vote? It just sounds like so ungenuine.
Arvin, you want to come in here? Are we live yet? Are we broadcasting?
Yeah, we're live.
Oh, okay.
Nice. Oh, here's Harris talking about her life story about how tough it was for her.
Going to make it work, and he's probably sitting there deciding that.
Yeah, who else I found out was a prosecutor recently? I didn't know this before. Bill Weld, and he was.
Bill Weld. You didn't know that?
No, I didn't know that. But I'm reading this book, 3 Felonies a Day, and he's the subject of one of the stories, and he's one of these tyrants who just goes in there and starts like raping everybody, like. We don't care if you're guilty or not. We're going to find something. We're going to throw you in prison for 50 years.
Wasn't there some revenge involved in one of these prosecutions? Or some little bit of something, or
probably.
So it's been said.
It wouldn't surprise me.
I mean, here's the thing. Can you guys hear me, by the way?
Yep.
All right. So, I mean, here's the thing when you have people like Bill Weld. I mean, it's literally somebody who just represents the status quo. And we have to decide at our core, as a party, as a culture, do we want to maintain that status quo? This is a prosecutor. When we see the people that create these negative prosecutions that put people behind bars for no legitimate reason, who believe that law and order is the right way to run our country, and I mean like that in a sarcastic way, not legitimate law and real order, by which I mean bullying minorities, locking them up. Bill Weld is that. And for us to say, like, look at all the things that the Democratic prosecutors are doing, but we're not going to hold our own people to the same standard, to me, that's extreme hypocrisy. I mean, Bill Weld is the exact type of problem that we need to be fighting against.
He is. He worked with Hillary Clinton on the Nixon impeachment. I mean, this guy's a long time operative, going way, way back. I'm surprised that our party fell for that in 2016. But anyways, he's not the main issue here. Trump's the one that everybody's running against, and these Democrats are stabbing each other in the back to get a shot at him.
Right. It's like the crabs trying to claw their way out of a bucket.
Yeah, crabs in a bucket. That's the Democrat Party right now.
Well, the question they're asking, is a wealth tax the best way to address income inequality? And they're all given kind of the same talking points, the top 1%, and they go and attack Donald Trump. And I'll say again, just get rid of the middle class tax burden. We had for 200 years, the middle class paid almost nothing because we had a very, very small constitutionally limited government, and we were able to take care of problems at the local level. No one would have gone to Beto or Warren or any of these other clown show and said, you need to take care of my child care. You just take, if you're not paying any taxes, your paycheck is 30 to 40% larger, and you have almost twice as much purchasing power. People had almost twice as much purchasing power in a free society, a libertarian society. You wouldn't have to go to the clowns anyway.
Yeah, but then you factor in the property tax that everybody's paying that they shouldn't be paying, and all the sales tax and everything, and you realize that you take their cost of living down by about half, and now they actually are earning 4 times as much than they would be when you take all those out. But something else interesting about when you talk about income tax as the primary tax that most people are talking about, most people weren't paying that until World War II, because that's the whole scam of the income tax. Nobody's supposed to be paying it. This was something that they came in. I mean, think about it. The income tax was created around 1913, and how did that happen? Just one day, the government said, "Oh, everybody's going to start paying income tax," and all of these companies, like everybody starts getting W-2s now, and everybody has to start. That didn't happen. That's not how it happened. Most people weren't paying taxes in 1913, and they didn't until World War II, because
another thing they did with the tax brackets is, when these tax brackets, or generally speaking, these tax brackets were first introduced, $30,000 was a lot more. That was like $300,000, making $300,000 back in, the 50s or something like that. So they didn't adjust the taxation rates, the tax rates, for many, many, many years in inflation, decades. And so now a guy making $30,000 a year, you want to take 20% or whatever percent from that guy. That's a lot of money. Whereas when this all started out, when they first introduced everybody to this, it was taxing the rich. Making $30,000 a year was a lot of money. You could buy a house for $3,000 then.
The really interesting, I mean, the core of this is this discussion of, do we want to be a welfare state? Because the fact is this: if we're going to have universal welfare, things like public schools, that's universal welfare. Public schools that so far all of our previous candidates have openly supported. Bill Weld, Gary Johnson, Justin Amash voted to increase public school spending in DC, which, in addition to being just stupid ideas, politically bizarre. If Justin Amash had voted to increase public school spending in Michigan, I could at least see it, because those are people who are voting for him. For him to increase government school spending in DC is bizarre beyond means. I mean, that's a true believer in the welfare state. And we have to decide, if we want a welfare state, do we want middle class people to be getting welfare? Because if we do, that's going to be expensive. It's going to cost a lot to have 100% or 95% of the population on welfare, and of one kind or another. And whether that's educational welfare in the form of government schools, whether that's medical welfare in the form of Medicare and Medicaid, that needs to end if we're going to lower taxes. If we're going to be a free society, the welfare state has to go.
Speaking of schools, ask you this, Arvin, why should government take your money from you while you're working and then make you go back to one government office after another and fill out a lot of forms and jump through a lot of bureaucratic hoops to try to get some of your own money back? Why don't they just let you keep your own money?
That's exactly right. I mean, we need to end the income tax. We need to end property taxes, but that has to go with, we need to end the things that they're paying for. I mean, we can't say like, yeah, we're going to keep welfare and keep government schools and keep all this stuff, and we're not going to try to have any taxes. I mean, those two go together. If we scale back military involvement overseas, we can cut taxes. If we get rid of government schools, we can cut taxes. If we cut the spending, then we can cut the taxes. If we don't cut the spending, can't really cut the taxes.
Here's something else that, like,
hold on, Dan, I wanted to mention, I don't know if you guys know or heard that, speaking of schools, there's a school somewhere, I don't know where it is, but they're wasting a lot of money over a hat, just like the one Dan's wearing. How much money do you think has been wasted over this hat issue?
Oh, yeah, well, wait until they get sued over it. Because, I mean, here's the thing, and this is like the biggest problem, right? You're sending your kids to these schools, and this kid that got kicked out for wearing this hat, there's a state law that says schools can make their own rules, but they have to fit to this policy. And one policy is they have to allow them to wear hats outdoors because it's a medical thing. They don't want kids passing out from heat exhaustion or whatever, right? So there's a law. Schools cannot do that, but they just make up their own rules and they enforce it. And this mother took her kid back. Like, they're supposed to go, he's suspended. He's supposed to go back to school. She brings in the law from the state and shows it to the school. And they say, oh, well, we don't go by that rule. We make our own rules here. And this is government agency. And so this is what people don't understand about, like, when like government saying, hey, we're going to give you all these wonderful welfare things, right? Like $1,000 a month or Medicare and all these other things. All they have to do is find one reason not to like you and take those things away. So like this kid, they don't like him because he's smarter than them and he points out like, hey, you're doing the rules wrong. And what does this school do? They suspend him illegally. They do all these other things. They take things away from him. What happens to military veterans, people who risk their lives to protect the country under the federal government's policies? And then what happens when they break a law like, oh, I have PTSD, so I'm taking cannabis to medicate for that. Oh, sorry, you just lost all your medical benefits from the VA. This is what they just screw people over left and right. And when you're dependent on the government to give you these things, they can just take it away whenever they want.
They can. They have been using, and it's sometimes very subtle the way that Dan's pointing out, but a lot of times it's honestly not that subtle. I mean, the way that the federal government, for example, controls the drinking age is simply by saying if you have a drinking age below 21, you're not going to get your transportation funding. We're going to take money from the people in your state, and we're not going to let you spend it on roads and whatnot unless you have these, in my opinion, idiotic laws. I mean, to me, somebody's 18 is
and I put a bill in that had to kind of circumnavigate that 1984 Federal Highway Act, and that was Democrats and Republicans who voted for that. So this isn't just Democrats doing this top-down government. There were a lot of Republicans. I think there were even more Republicans who voted for this one. And the rule is what states have to do if they want to get their own federal highway funds back is they can't allow one person to serve alcohol to someone who's 18, 19, 20 years old, even if they're with adults, and they can't allow public use or public possession of it. So when I tried to write this law, it took enormous amount of time to try to write a state law. There are 45 states now that have some kind of adult supervision exception or a religious exception on that drinking age. There are only 5 states left. There are only 5 states that don't have some kind of exception. So there's just New Hampshire is one because they just don't understand it. And then the other 4 are Bible Belt states. And ironically, most of the Bible Belt states actually have some type of religious exception. And most of the other states have some kind of parental supervision exception, or there's some limit where you can have a beer or wine with dinner if your parents are there. And it's just really strange that the federal government would step in and just, it's another way that they control is that the federal government takes education funding and healthcare funding and runs it through the federal loop.
Yeah, it's leverage. I mean, every program they create they're getting leverage over you. There's the gun thing, right? If you're registered for medicinal cannabis, you lose your gun rights. There's just so many things that they can, you don't renew your driver's license on time and all of a sudden you can lose welfare benefits or, just whatever it is, it doesn't. And they're already trying to do this. Oh, you're on welfare? Well, let's see. If you don't pass a drug test, we're not going to, we're going to take it away from you. And like, I don't really see, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of welfare to begin with, but I don't really see the correlation. If somebody's on welfare and they're living by all your rules, what do you care if they're, if they're medicating with something that's helping them get over a problem? Isn't the whole point of welfare that you're supposed to be helping them? But now you're telling me, well, we're going to help you, but you can't actually help yourself. Oh, you want to make some more money? We're going to take your benefits away. You want to get a job? We're going to take your benefits away. That's literally, they're incentivizing people to get attached to these things, and it's criminal, and you're setting yourself up for failure if you fall for this trap. It's like the free cheese and the mouse trap.
One of the really big issues in terms of this whole issue of how do we get people to have access, one of the biggest problems is regulation. The only type of regulation to me that I could even see making sense is if the regulation, protects some bystander. But the idea that somebody who's braiding hair needs to get a license to braid hair, that's absurd. And the simple fact is that somebody who is is finding it easier to get a welfare check than to be able to start a business, that's not an accident. That is an entire group of people being pushed towards welfare and pushed away from work by these Democrat-type policies. And that's why I think a lot of us, at least for me, if I'm elected, I'm going to be shutting down all regulations, getting rid of all licensing requirements on small businesses, using whatever means necessary. I mean, we have got to end this tyranny that's preventing people from working.
This is something that I found that's really interesting. A lot of these rules, just like that school that says, oh, well, I understand what the law says, but we're going to enforce our own rules. A lot of these government agencies are doing this. I've seen cops who threaten to arrest somebody for failure to ID, which they can't do. That's not an actual, you can't just arrest somebody for failure to ID. They arrest people for resisting arrest. They require licenses when licenses aren't required by law. And yeah, you could take them to court and you could sue them, but you don't want to take it that far to start a business. But the police are going to harass you day and night if you don't, saying, oh, you need this permit, you need this permit. You can show them the law. It doesn't matter. This is what they do in every aspect of everything. They just kind of, they cross over every boundary that they have. Why? Because we gave them an inch and now they're taking a mile. It happens everywhere. So it's not even just a matter of changing the law, because a lot of these laws that they're enforcing aren't even enforceable laws. It's just bullying tactics.
So now the question they're asking, creepy Joe Biden, is, should U.S. troops be sent back into northern Syria to prevent an ISIS resurgence and protect our Kurdish allies?
Why do we have Kurdish allies? Are Kurds somehow helping make America safer? Is their army so strong? Is their will so mighty that in addition to our massive fleet of aircraft carriers and nuclear missiles, a few Kurdish people are going to help us out in some way? And that's absurd. That is a stupid one-sided alliance. Creating a military alliance with somebody that's weak and also being attacked is stupid. And the first thing I'm going to do as president is get rid of any alliance we have with anybody whose army is weaker than our own. There is no reason to ally ourselves with something that's basically just military welfare.
I don't know. Not ally with anybody whose army that's weaker than our own. I'm not sure about that, Arvin. But you know,
ally with somebody with a weaker army. What is the game?
But hold on. The way that we go about looking at these situations has been constricted down to this narrow, series of solutions here. Why is it that we need the state to solve this problem? Okay, obviously there's people who are concerned about the Kurds. Why can't those people organize and go deal with that, go volunteer? I know people personally that have traveled over there and volunteered alongside with the Kurds, ham radio things and stuff like that. Now, there are some laws, I don't know if it's the Logan Act or something, the Radical Caucus actually has a platform against this. But there's some laws restricting people from doing that. Would that be a more acceptable solution for you guys?
I see that's right there. I mean, this is where you see the connection between this and the right to bear arms. People say, why do you need a machine gun? Well, if you want to go help the Kurds or whoever fight against a powerful army, you're going to need a machine gun. And the fact is, by restricting the type of weapons that people can have to non-military, it prevents people from doing what you're saying, Ben, which is on their own engaging in military help for people. They're saying basically only the state can make military decisions. You as an individual can't. Even if you could personally afford the weapons, you're not allowed to make those decisions, those moral decisions on your own.
And
I don't know. I don't think that any other country would allow us to, allow somebody to just fly into their country with a machine gun on their airplane or grenade launchers or military hardware. I think you'd have to go over there with on a military plane. But
well, yeah, but that's also, I mean, think about how the U.S. military gets there. They don't really do that either. They fly their own planes. Usually they cross a border illegally, and it's an invasion.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, live and let live philosophy. I said at the last debate, we're not fiscally conservative and socially liberal. We're fiscally libertarian, we're socially libertarian, and we're libertarian on foreign policy. That means live and let live. Get government out of everything. Get government out of the affairs of other countries. There's nothing we can do in the Middle East except cause more problems. And I think we're seeing a lot of the problems. Osama bin Laden admitted in video that he was using U.S. occupation and U.S. involvement in the Middle East as one of his biggest recruiting tools.
By we, do you mean the state?
Good. Yeah, good one. Good one. I've always corrected other people when they say we're over there, you know.
Well, that's what I'm trying to separate here is that, okay, people want to do this. Well, what's standing in the way of them doing this? There's a couple of old laws. They're like a couple hundred years old that are standing in the way of people organizing and going over there on their own and not involving the entire country or indebting us or asking us to pay for it via taxation. They're doing it independently on their own. Nobody here has a problem with doing things that way.
200 years ago, Congress had issued letters of marque and reprisal against the pirates of the Caribbean, literally, in the late 1700s and early 1800s. And the U.S. Navy put a stop to that because the privateers were so successful at defeating the pirates that the U.S. Navy no longer had an apparent reason to exist. And they had Jefferson came along and he was putting a lot of their ships into Navy ships into mothballs because the privateers were kind of showing them up. So I don't see any reason why we couldn't just put a price on the head of some of these lead terrorists and just let people who are willing to risk their own lives go in and we should be sending our military, our National Guards, and our reservists in to go get injured and killed. We've got thousands and thousands of our military personnel get killed in the Middle East, and they sign up to go defend other countries.
In the spirit of something that you just said there, would you be opposed to auctioning off the Navy's ghost fleet to the citizens of the United States?
I'm not sure that I would auction off Navy ships like that. Certainly not a state-of-the-art military hardware.
Well, how's anybody going to go, after any, marque and reprisal? How are we going to do that?
We're already. I mean, there's a lot of that out there. I saw there was an auction. They were off. What were they auctioning off? Like F-22s or something.
Yeah, it's already happening.
Yeah, and there are people who own like World War II tanks, and I'm sure other people I know there's a few shooting ranges in Texas you can go to, and they'll let you fire one. I'm sure there are other people who have more modern tanks. Well, people make their own killdozer.
They have that. What is it? That 1045 or something plan where they're cooperating with law enforcement and they're giving them some of the equipment. Well, why not give this to some of the people independently that want to go fight alongside the Kurdish militias,
state militias? Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, if people want to buy this stuff and we got it just laying around.
I think I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent. We're talking about the President of the United States. Should the President of the United States send our military people off into Syria, send them back into northern Syria to go fight? And the answer is simple: no. Get government out of everything. Get government out of the Middle East. Get government out of the affairs of other countries, out of our personal lives, out of our bank accounts. Get government out of our lives, but also get government out of other people's lives.
I think it bears mentioning, though, in terms of what Max said, what you've been talking about, what Ben was just talking about, is that the U.S. government has sold military hardware. Specifically, it sold to the Taliban. I mean, the U.S. military is like the worst at making that decision. They get the weapons to the worst people they can possibly get the weapons to, and taking that ability to make terribly bad, stupid decisions out of the hand of the government, putting it in literally anybody else's hands possible, to me would be a step up.
I'm sure there's some churches or whatnot in the U.S. that'd be interested in helping out their friends, the Kurds, and various different people. And why not give them the equipment and allow them to do that?
What this president has done.
It's the same thing. I mean, people want to help the Kurds. Well, why does the U.S. military have to be the one and only answer?
I think that's like this whole this whole idea with everything. It's easy to help people with other people's money, with other people's lives. It's easy to send other people to die for your cause than for you to go volunteer to do it yourself. It's why we see Congress, whenever they do a draft, not that they've done one lately, but whenever they do one, they don't send their own kids. Their kids are somehow exempt.
Sometimes they do. I mean,
they're yeah, but then you have like George W. who you
have John McCain, who was a prisoner for quite some time. I mean,
yeah, but who was his dad?
Al Gore, George Bush Jr., Bill Clinton, even Donald Trump with his little foot spur that got him out of military service. I don't think we've had a military veteran in office since.
I'm not talking about in office. I'm talking about like whose parents are in office. Like
getting out of having to serve. We have to serve. Everything is the rich man's war and the poor man's fight. The politically well-connected start all these wars overseas to advance their own financial interests or prove some kind of weird foreign policy theory. I mean, the neocons are almost worse than the money grubbers, because I think the neocons in their mind think that they're using the military in the world as some kind of force for good. But would we want foreign countries, China or France, sending their military onto our shores to change the way our country operates? We don't want other countries sending air flights over or dropping bombs or precision bombs on American targets. We don't want other countries attacking us or invading or occupying us. Why would we think that other countries would want to be occupied, blown up?
Ironically, those are the same guys who are always preaching about border security and how a nation needs a strong border, but they're willing to invade every other border.
I serve on the Senate Intelligence Committee. I have, over a period of time, received classified information about the threats to our security and hotspots around the world. What has happened in Syria is yet again Donald Trump selling folks out. And in this case, he sold out the Kurds, who, yes, fought with us, and thousands died in our fight against ISIS. And let's be
that's the thing. It's not our fight. It's not our fight against ISIS. ISIS does not pose an existential threat to the United States. Honestly, if we got out of there, it doesn't pose a threat at all to the United States. Does it pose a threat to other countries? I don't know. It probably does. But since that's not our country, it's not our damn problem. And if some individual feels that it is their individual problem, they should do what Ben said. They should do what Teddy Roosevelt did and just go join the fight. Nothing is stopping a person from enlisting in the Kurdish army. I would think it's a weird idea, but there's nothing stopping you from doing it. If that's important to you, do it. Otherwise, stop robbing us and forcing us to pay for an ill-fated, completely non-planned nonsense war. We need to get out of all of those wars. War is there only to keep America safe, not for any other purpose, not for nation building, not for protecting the Kurds. The Kurds, if they need protection, that's their job. It's not our job.
This whole thing is really nonsense.
It's not the state's job. Let's separate it.
Why doesn't Kamala Harris go over, take a machine gun and go defend the Kurds herself instead of sending our guys over there?
Well, I think everyone's kind of missing the point. This is like, this whole thing is an attack on Trump. Like, I mean, it doesn't, like, I haven't heard anything about the Kurds in like months or years, and now we're hearing about it because the Kurds said something, and the Democrats are just using this as an excuse to let's hate Trump. Like, realistically, like that's what it is. There's like most of those people who are talking about the Kurds have no idea anything about them or what their history is or anything else. They just heard, oh my God, something bad happened, and now they're trying to push that on the American voters who haven't heard anything about this because all they know about is ISIS and Taliban and everything else.
There's people that have been following this. I mean, I'm aware of people. Like I said, I know somebody personally that has gone over there and volunteered, who was former Air Force. After they got out of the Air Force, went over there on their own card because they made a lot of friends while they were over there serving in Turkey, which is supposed to be a NATO ally. So yeah, it's messy, but for people that want to be involved, and there are people that want to be involved. I mean, we see it on social media. Apparently the Democrats want to be involved. I say, you know what? We've got a large fleet of ghost ships, that are just sitting there mothballed. We got all this equipment. Let's sell it to them and let them go over there and help their friends. Why not? Let them put their money in their lives.
Perspective on this, right? Because Ben, you're absolutely right when you bring up NATO. Right now, our NATO ally, the Turkey, is attacking the Kurds. Our other NATO ally, Spain, is attacking their own freedom and independence movements in Catalonia. They've locked people in jail for sedition for like 18 years for daring to speak out against the Spanish government. Those are our allies. Those are the people we're protecting, those governments. We're protecting the worst sociopaths. When it comes to people who actually stand for our values, American values, the only country that I believe that actually stands for American values is Hong Kong. And they've done literally nothing but just hide and be weak about it and hide it from the media. Now let's talk about the Kurds though, because I think people need to get some perspective. The idea that the Kurds are these gentle, kind people who've been wrong. The Kurds are just as crazy as everybody else in that damn area. There's the issues that they have right now. I know we have issues with gender equality in America. I'm not saying that they're all fixed or whatever, but the last I checked, there's not a lot of forced marriages and honor killings in America. But in Kurdish areas, in Kurdish culture, that is still a problem. What is it about that culture that is so wonderful and so good that we need to be sacrificing ourselves for their idiocy? I mean, if they want to have a backwards culture, fine, have a backwards culture, but don't blame people when your backwardsness is preventing you from being able to actually thrive and exist in an economic or militarily competitive environment.
What's the state here, man? It's the state involvement. There should be no we. It's the state, and what I'm doing, what you're doing. I guess maybe what we're doing right here. But they want, all these people are talking about involving the state, the military, NATO allies, and all that. And I say, you know what? If people want to be involved in Hong Kong stuff, let them be involved in Hong Kong stuff. They want to go over there and do that. And then if people want to go over there and be involved with the Kurds, let them do that. But we don't have to involve the state.
For the record, I want to say this, that I have no interest, even if things were the way that you want to be, the way that I want to be, I would never in a million years risk my life for a culture that's so backwards, such a backwards culture, that in this modern era, they're still dealing with forced marriages and honor killings. If that's what's going on in your culture, I'm not helping your culture.
Some people might be interested in going over there and trying to improve things. You know, some people might want to take that upon themselves. And if they want to go over there and do all that good work, I say, let them. But we don't have to involve the state here or the United States military.
Yeah, and there are plenty of people who would be willing to do that. I mean, I've been going around the world to some places that are, I won't say that I've been trying to convince people that they shouldn't have forced marriages, but I have been talking to a lot of people who live in countries that aren't, very free societies, and trying to bring a few people up so that they can share that freedom within their own country. And I think that's kind of how it starts. But that doesn't mean everybody has to do that. So the fact that Arvin is saying he wouldn't help that culture. Okay, that's fine. And maybe I wouldn't help that culture by fighting off an invasion. Maybe I would go help them in some ideological way. But yeah, nobody should have to. And when you're doing this with government, you're forcing everybody to, because whether you're creating a draft and forcing people to go over and risk their lives, or just stealing from people to pay other people to do it, or to pay for bombs and bullets, you're forcing everybody to be involved.
Questions. The next one that they're on is, would you publicly reveal what the U.S. knows about Putin's corruption and work with allies to freeze his bank accounts?
Do everything that we want to accomplish militarily.
What?
Question again.
What are these guys smoking?
Why?
Would you publicly reveal what the U.S. knows about Putin's corruption and work with allies to freeze his bank accounts?
His American bank accounts?
We don't know. Does anybody here know what the U.S. knows about Putin's corruption?
I'm
sure Hillary's got some dirt on it.
I think that after Russian...
Why have they not come forward?
We need to now focus on that latter.
Well,
look, this is
the answer to the question here is that anybody in this crowd of Democrats that obviously they haven't come forward. So no matter what they say here, look at this.
Making sure
unless somebody's going to reveal something right now in the Democrat debates,
to make sure that they can accomplish those goals.
This is the strangest and stupidest boogeyman possible. Russia's economy right now is about twice the size of Italy's economy. And Italy's economy, in case you didn't watch the news, is a joke and a laughingstock. It is not a superpower. It is not significant. It is minor and inconsequential. And yeah, once it was a great threat, but not for decades now.
I believe.
And so the question that you're going to be asking is, would you reveal the corruption being done by the NSA or by the CIA or by the military or by government schools or any of those? Because that's your actual job. Putin isn't really threatening anybody. He's not passing any laws. He has less power than a county councilman in America. He has no power here. So he can't do anything to us. Who cares what he does? We need to be looking at the corruption here. The corruption that's happening in America, because that is affecting us.
I mean, unless, what does the U.S. have jurisdiction to freeze his bank accounts unless he's storing money in the U.S. anyway? Which, I mean, if you're Putin and you're doing something that's trying to screw over the U.S., I would imagine you would know that having your money here is pretty high risk in the first place, and you probably wouldn't do that. So the whole thing just sounds insane.
What is this about?
It's about creating a boogeyman. How do we impeach Trump? We got to find some link to Putin.
And my take on this is, should the federal government even have the power to freeze not only foreign bank accounts, but to freeze your bank account, to freeze domestic accounts, not even having a warrant, not even having a conviction, not even having proof that you're engaged in some kind of criminal wrongdoing? And what does freezing your bank account do? That's been used as a tactic by prosecutors to go after people and take away their ability to get access to their own accounts to pay for their own defense attorney.
Yep.
And people get stuck with a public defender who shows up drunk or shows up defending the wrong case. The federal government shouldn't have arbitrary power to go after people's money, their business, their personal life, shut down accounts in the first place, whether it's here or overseas at all. The powers that they always say they're going to use this to go after international mobsters or organized crime or the Mexican drug cartels or who knows. They always take those powers. They say, we won't use those powers to go after ordinary people. We'll only go after the boogeymen, the bad guys. And sure enough, you have 80,000 SWAT raids into people's year. You have civil forfeiture seizing at $400 billion a year in assets, boats, planes, cash, cars from ordinary people without trial. So all these powers, they say, well, we're only going to use this to go after Putin. We'll only use this to go after organized crime, the RICO statutes. They're using those same powers to go after ordinary people. So it's really a question of how much power should the government have? Should any of these politicians, Trump or any of these Democrats, have in the first place?
It just seems like
go ahead, Ben. Sorry.
I was just going to say it just seems like they're plotting a heist right here in front of America. I mean, you want to talk about collusion? They're conspiring to steal somebody's money. For what reason? That's my question. What? That's what they're doing. They're planning a heist. Should we seize Putin's money?
Should they steal? The answer being no.
Where's it go? Why?
I mean, Max, I want to bring up something that connecting to what you just said, which is that's exactly what they did with the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act was supposed to be used only on terrorists, and yet it's been used 100 times as often for drugs and prostitution, victimless crimes, as anything even indirectly related to terrorism. And if they continue to be like, yeah, we should be able to seize accounts, it's not about seizing Putin's account. It's about seizing your account, my account. It's about creating the precedent where they can seize your money for any reason or no reason at all, just because they want to. That's the kind of thing we need to stop. And so you're right, Max. Putin, like the federal government, should not have the ability to freeze anybody's accounts ever under any circumstance. It's one of the reasons I think so many people have started switching to cryptocurrency, because the federal government can't freeze those accounts.
That's why I have Bitcoin. That's why I have Litecoin. That's why I have other altcoins that I'm not going to discuss. It's because, well, yeah, I mean, I'm selling some Bitcoin to help pay for my startup for my campaign for some of the fundraising letters I've got to put out.
I'm still like, did you guys hear what I just heard? Because if we were sitting here having a conversation between the four of us, plotting on seizing,
Trump's account,
taking money, the electronic theft, electronic banking theft. If we were, would that be a crime? If we were sitting here actively plotting to do that? I mean, I believe at some point, we would be caught in the act. What did they say? Was anybody in support of that, Max?
No. Again, what the founding fathers were concerned about was arbitrary power. It was the power of government officials acting alone without the approval of either of the two other branches of government to just have arbitrary power to go out and go after people.
But
government officials going after individuals, just federal prosecutors just randomly going after ordinary individuals. So when they were talking about limiting the size, scope, and power of the federal government, a constitutionally limited government under Jefferson and Madison only took about 0.5% of GDP, and it was because they didn't want to have a big top-heavy government going after everyone. They wanted to have just a little tiny federal government that would take care of things at the local level, but they didn't want to have federal prosecutors. They didn't, they saw what was happening with state prosecutors. They'd seen what had happened with the King's prosecutors going after ordinary Americans and using double jeopardy, trying people twice for the same charge, moving people around, playing games with individuals. federal prosecutors are some of the worst, but you have, of course, you have county prosecutors around the country who are terrible also, which is another reason why we've got to have the Libertarian Party, why we got to focus down ticket on some of these, county prosecutors, city officials, get ordinary libertarians involved in the process that way.
I mean, this is like state-sponsored cybercrime. That's what they're talking about.
That's what they're doing.
People are dying in the street.
And that's why things like what Dan, like the work that you do, spreading the word both domestically and international, the idea that taxation is theft. It doesn't matter what you're using it for. It's a crime. It is a moral crime. It might not be against the law. It might be something you can talk about openly on TV with your 5 best friends playing a heist, whatever. But the simple fact is that this is a moral debate that we need to be having. The 2020 election cannot be just an election about amorality or some sort of like loosey-goosey political pragmatism. We have to stand on this principle that says stealing is wrong. Whether the government says it's right, it's wrong. We have a moral code. We have a conscience. We have tradition to tell us that stealing is wrong. Stealing, even for something that you might think is good, is still wrong. And that's why I think so many of us got behind this idea that says we need to end the welfare state. Even the welfare for the middle class, government schools, we need to end that. We need to end Obamacare, Medicare, Medicaid, all that has to go. So we can do what you're saying, Max, and make the federal government less than 1% of GDP. And by the way, that was a very small GDP. The United States was not an economic superpower at the time, so we're talking about a smaller piece of a much smaller pie.
Do you support red flag laws and increasing gun control?
Yeah. We should be red flagging politicians every time they say they want to pass a law. That should red flag them from being on a ballot, right?
I mean, they're planning another heist here. They want to steal the guns. They want to steal everybody's guns, and then once they got everybody's guns, look at what they're planning on doing to Putin. They're just going to take everybody's money, disarm everybody, and then just take everybody's money. Then what are you going to do about it?
And here's the thing. They're not saying let's like find people who are really good at investigating and seeing if somebody's a threat. It's just saying if you think that somebody is a threat because you just don't like their politics or whatever, we're going to violate their sovereignty, their natural rights, and all that kind of stuff.
I mean, their politics of taking money out of people's bank accounts.
Yeah, they're probably just taking money out of people's bank
they're
accounts.
on. Like,
Yeah, I mean,
was
I
watching
can
this.
see why somebody'd be upset.
There was this somebody got some undercover video of, I guess it was, I don't know how real this stuff was, but it was like, I guess, undercover footage of the president of CNN saying, basically how they're plotting to go after Trump and how we have too many people on our channel who are being too nice to Trump. We can't have that anymore. And it's like, okay, so what? You're gonna threaten to fire somebody because they speak too well of a politician you don't like? Like that. I mean, that's how these things can totally be abused. I mean, think about all the laws we have about wrongfully terminating people. Think about the laws that we have about, you can't, equal opportunity. You can't tell somebody they can't rent an apartment from you based on their race or their sex or any of this stuff. And think about how you're basically saying, like, we're going to give the government the power to actually do that, to give them the power to do that in a very, in a much worse way, because they're not just, we're renting you an apartment. We're making you entirely dependent on us with all these socialist programs that we have, and by banning all the competition, we're the only game in town. You have to buy from us. And if we give you a red flag because we don't like something that you said, well, guess what? You're going to starve to death, or you're not going to have access to health care or all this other stuff. That's the power that you're giving them with any kind of red flag law.
And here's the thing, Dan. Ben, I'm not sure about you yet, Max, whether or not you've experienced this, but we've all seen what happens when you let idiots make decisions based on their emotions. Dan, somebody who's wearing a hat very strikingly similar to your campaign hats has been kicked out of school. I've been kicked out of social events, like banned from social events, not political events, social events, because I oppose welfare and because my views make people on welfare feel uncomfortable. Ben, you can't run for local office because of your, victimless crime past or whatever. I mean, these are things that we're facing. When you let people make these emotional decisions, this is the result. They end up making bad emotional decisions because emotions can't be relied on. I mean, at some point, I mean, not to go too far on the other side, but at some point, the facts don't care about your feelings. There are facts and there are feelings. And your feeling that somebody is dangerous doesn't mean they're dangerous. That kid who's wearing your hat isn't a danger. He's maybe a danger to the status quo, but he's not a physical danger to anybody. I mean, you're not a danger to somebody then because, at some point in the past you smoked marijuana. I mean, these types of things have got to end. And saying like, yeah, let's rely more on people's backwards emotions. It's stupid. It's wrong. It's a terrible idea.
So here's my answer. No, and we've had red flag laws and all kinds of different gun control laws come through every single session, and I voted them down every single time. In fact, last year we got constitutional carry passed in New Hampshire. So now you have Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine are all three now constitutional carry states, and I've got a bumper sticker on my car that says, keep the bad guys guessing, and it's a map. All of northern New England is now constitutional carry or Alaska carry. You don't need to have concealed weapons permit anymore, and it took years and years to get it done, but we got it done. Cities, states, and countries that have disarmed their people or enacted strict gun control laws, they've all seen their crime rates go up, almost without exception. About 85% of all homicides in America happen in Democrat-run jurisdictions where you've got strict gun control laws and a lot of other policies, sanctuary cities, revolving door, welfare state, and whatnot. But the main one turns out to be gun control. Gun control makes crime worse. Criminals don't care what the gun control laws are. They don't care if you put up a sign that says gun-free zone. They don't care if they have to wait 3 days to get a weapon, because they're not going to wait even 1 day. 70% of weapons obtained for the commission of crimes are obtained illegally. And if in Canada and a few other countries where they've, Canada, Britain, Australia, in the mid-1990s, they enacted really strict gun control laws. And what happened is crime rates were going down, then they enact strict gun control laws, then they plateau and they go up a little bit. And then finally, people start buying firearms, mostly handguns again, different types of firearms, and all of a sudden, crime rates start going down again. All 15 of the 15 highest crime counties are Democrat-run counties, and all 15 of those have strict gun control laws that they passed saying, oh, they're only going to take away firearms from bad guys. They're only going to go after the boogeyman. They're not going to go after you. They're not going to prosecute you for acting in self-defense or carrying a firearm. All these assurances, and they know it's a lie the whole time.
The thing about this idiocy, Max, is that in Britain, now they're working on knife control, because it turns out it's actually the human nature that causes killing, not an inanimate object. Any soldier will tell you that the soldier is the weapon. The gun is not the weapon. The mindset to kill is the weapon. The murderer is not a murderer because of he has access to a gun, but there's something in that person that's making that person do it. They can't use a gun, they'll use a knife, they'll use a brick, they'll use, a candelabra, they'll use anything they need to use because there are, or they just use their hands. I mean, what are you going to outlaw somebody's fists? It's a bizarre way to approach this problem. It is a mental problem. It is a moral problem. In a society where we're settling everything internationally with violence, we're teaching people that violence is good. If we change our own actions, and as individuals say, no, I don't support the federal government's military violence, we're sending a message in our community that says, no, we don't support violence. And we need to bring violence out of our hearts, out of our government, out of our military and foreign policy, and get rid of this insane idea that banning guns is going to do anything at all.
There's Kamala Harris and now Joe Biden. Kamala Harris put away thousands and thousands of young people, blacks and Latino kids. And a lot of these jurisdictions where they have strict gun control, I was saying before, gun control laws are racist. They've been racist since the Ku Klux Klan, and white supremacists were pushing them since white supremacists like Woodrow Wilson and Franklin Roosevelt were pushing the first gun control laws in the country. And it's been the same thing all along. And they target people of color, they target poor people, they target people who live in dangerous communities. And it's obviously a double standard that you have all these rich politicians and celebrities lecturing everyone else about, how terrible guns are. They don't know what the hell they're talking about. And yet they have their armed security guards, they have Secret Service, they have all the defense in the world, and you're not allowed to even carry a firearm to defend your own family.
The majority of homicides committed with a gun in this country are from handguns, not assault style weapons. What's your plan to prevent those deaths?
Thank you very much. I grew up in
the statistics are that 22 you're what 220 times more likely to be killed by a cop than by a mass shooting.
Because folks were shooting.
And even more than that for suicide.
And that's where we need to get emotions out of our logical reasoning. The simple fact is this: a mass shooting is a terrifying thing. It's emotional. It's all this kind of stuff, and it's also not statistically significant.
It also always happens in gun-free zones. Oddly enough.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, except for that fact. I mean, of course, it's going to happen in a gun-free zone. But that's the thing. It's not statistically significant. And if you start building your policy around things that are lurid, but rare, you're going to end up with nonsensical laws. And that's what we're seeing in all these different areas. We need to be repealing these laws. I mean, as I've said before, and I'm sure that many of you guys have similar positions, that if I'm elected, I'm going to, by using the power of the presidential pardon, nullify all gun laws. I'll just pardon every single person with a weapons possession charge, because it is not wrong to possess a weapon. It is wrong to kill a person who didn't threaten you in any kind of way, but it is not wrong to own a gun or a tank or a plane. Owning a thing is not wrong. It depends what you do with it. And if you do something wrong with a gun or with a knife or with a fork, that's a problem.
I don't know where they think all these gun confiscation plans or schemes they think are going to go. I mean, I saw a video the other day out of Hong Kong of some guy doing a flying kick into a police officer. I don't know what the backstory that led up to that was, but I mean, how are you gonna regulate that? You're gonna seize flying kicks. There's violence in Hong Kong. People are getting hurt. There's violence all over the world.
They're creating their own weapons. I saw those guys shooting bricks out of slingshots. Other people, you talk about like London, where all the guns are banned and people are attacking people with acid, or people building bombs out of like manure and gasoline. People are going to create weapons. Like it's insane to think you're going to get rid of that. All you're doing is you're making some people helpless. And I've heard some of the dumbest arguments that, they sound kind of good sometimes, but because that's the thing. Everybody just wants to be safe, right? If you look at it from like, okay, yeah, everybody wants to live in a safe world. That sounds wonderful, but it's not possible, and especially not with this legislation. And like, there's, I've heard people that they get emotionally behind it. Like, yeah, well, you think you're such a big shot with your gun. Why don't you just fight like a man? And it's like, okay, what about people who are stuck in wheelchairs? What about the elderly? What about these people who they can't get up and fight like a man like you think they should? Like, but it's like that's exactly what this is. And that's what the Democrats are. They're getting people emotionally all riled up. And then they're getting them into a state like, yeah, I got to do something because the world sucks. Please, I'm going to vote for the Democrat because they're the only person who cares about my problem. Even though the Democrat knows, the politician knows that his solutions aren't going to solve anything. And they even want it that way because then if they solve the problem, they're not going to be able to sell you anything next year.
How will you tackle the opioid epidemic, specifically in rural areas that lack access to rehab and jobs? I'll give my answer real quick. I have a bill in to enact in New Hampshire, Portugal-style decrim. Offer treatment, prevention, and recovery support instead of prison. Do that at the local level through local churches, local charities, faith-based programs like Teen Challenge, private charities like Chucky's Fight, and do this work at the local level where you have some knowledge of the person with whom you're dealing. A large part of the drug crisis, large part of the opioid crisis, is people are put onto welfare and they're no longer working. They're not getting drug tested. And ironically, I think every Democrat on that stage has voted against random drug testing for welfare recipients. So as a taxpayer, you're being forced to the tune of about $1.1 trillion a year to subsidize the drug crisis. Portugal was successful in decrim. They didn't legalize it completely, but Spain, Italy, and Luxembourg decriminalized most drugs. Holland effectively tolerated or effectively re-legalized drugs, but all of those countries and many of the countries in Europe are moving away from using prisons, and they're using treatment, prevention, recovery support, employment support, individual programs targeted at individual people. And we can use local programs and faith-based programs to tackle the problem. Portugal cut heroin use in half. They cut heroin addiction rates in half. They cut drug-related crime in half. And they now have a 98% lower death rate from heroin than we do in New Hampshire. I just heard a statistic today that something like 70,000 Americans are dying because of the drug epidemic in this country. And it's primarily because it's made illegal, it's driven underground, and we've lost control over it.
Well, also by opioid, are they combining like heroin and opium with Oxycontin and fentanyl? Are we combining all this into one category? Howard
Yang's proposal to decriminalize possession and the use of small amounts of opioids solve the crisis. So I got to say that I agree in principle with Andrew Yang again.
The one major thing, and I think Max, you touched on this, is there isn't one opioid crisis. Each individual person that's facing this challenge is facing a separate and individual challenge. As you guys know, I work in education, and each person's journey through, whether it's something like math or physics, or a personal difficulty, or even something like this, it's highly individual. And if you try a one-size-fits-all approach, you usually end up with a one-size-fits-none approach. I don't know that I've ever met a person who's struggling with addiction that believed that being locked up and beaten and violated and brutalized for several years was what was going to help that person, nor did their families think that's what was going to help them. This is something that, because it's personal, cannot be handled in a one-size-fits-none method. Each person's struggle is their personal struggle, and they need to be turning to the things that make sense to them. Listen, as an atheist, I'm not going to turn to the church. It doesn't make any sense to me. But for people for whom religion is very important, turning to their faith is a solution that makes a lot of sense. For someone that has a different method, a different thing will make sense. And allowing both, when I say the free market, I don't just mean the profit-based free market. I mean people doing things, whether they're charging money or they're doing it voluntarily through charity. That's what's going to work. It's going to give people a variety of choices to say that, this is the thing that helped me come clean. You're facing something similar to me. Maybe you should try my thing. Maybe we should try a different thing. We recognize that different people like different foods. We don't make everybody eat the same type of food. We need to recognize the same thing is in this treatment of a very difficult and very personal challenge. It's going to be individual. If it's going to work, it's going to be individual. And that means we need to do what you're saying, Max, get the government completely out of it, legalize everything, small amounts, large amounts, medium amounts, get rid of all government restriction, and let people overcome these difficulties in ways that actually work.
Most people in prison for opiates or any drug are convicted under state laws, not federal laws. I mean, they're running for a federal position. There are federal laws, but most of the people who we'd be talking about, treatment, these people are actually state laws. So this needs to happen on the state level. People need to get active on the state level and change these things. You've seen done in places like Colorado and other places with marijuana, and now we see with the psilocybin and the mushrooms too. That's becoming legal on the state level. We need to see people fight on the state level because most people in prison are convicted under state laws.
That's true, but remember that there are incentives that the feds are giving. So they'll give, they'll give cash or they'll give equipment to police departments for, not quotas, but, for having great numbers in arrests for drug war related crimes and all this other stuff. So they are still incentivizing it.
Those programs got to get cut.
Yep.
Are you in favor of sending drug company executives to prison to hold them accountable for the opioid crisis?
Prison, please respond. Yes, I am. They need to be held accountable, not only financially, but also with criminal penalties.
And see, that's the kind of knowledge.
Were they above the law?
A person who makes a decision is responsible for that decision. And of course, their friends, their family, perfect strangers have every right and even maybe a moral obligation to help them overcome that. But to say that because you took something and did what you're not supposed to do with it, the manufacturer needs to be held responsible, that's insane. I mean, listen, if I buy a knife and stab myself with it on purpose, that's not the knife maker's fault. That's my fault. And this idea of putting the blame on everybody and everything but yourself, that is a deep-seated problem. It's not just in these areas. It's also in areas involving discussions around welfare and whatnot, because it's this idea that says, I have no responsibility for what I do. I can't control myself. I can't control how many kids I have. I can't control how much heroin I inject myself. Of course you can. That's what it means to be an adult in a free society. Stop doing the thing And if you can't stop, get somebody to help you stop. But don't blame the person who created the thing and say it's his fault. It's not his fault. It's your fault.
Well, I think there can be some responsibility depending on circumstances, and this is why I would say there needs to be a trial before saying somebody needs to go to prison. But if, for example, if a drug company is paying doctors or paying the FDA to say, okay, look, we know these things are addictive, but we want you to tell people that they need these to help their problems go away and to tell them that they're not addictive, then that would constitute some level of fraud, and I think that is punishable.
A political revolution that says enough is enough to this behavior.
Oh, Bernie.
What did Bernie say?
We're all very glad you're
Enough
doing well, as you
is
just
enough of this behavior.
But
So we
there
need
is
a political
question along
solution.
these lines, and I
The
want
top 1,024% of the 1%.
just had a heart attack. How do you reassure Democratic voters that you're up to the stress of the presidency?
Well, let me invite.
Here's the area where I'm probably going to actually agree with Bernie, which is I don't think that the presidential job should have a lot of stress. I think it should be a purely ceremonial job that has also no ceremonies. That's why if I'm elected, all I'm going to do is pardon all nonviolent drug offenders, nonviolent drug everybody, nonviolent Bitcoin users, people whose only crime is a gun possession. And then I'm just going to sell all government property that it possibly can, pay down, use that to get rid of all taxes, and basically use the power of the pardon as the only thing I'm going to do as president. Bring the troops home, pardon people for non-crimes. And so it shouldn't be a stressful job. And I think that Bernie, or honestly William Henry Harrison, would be great for it, because the less you do as president, I think any corpse would be a great president.
Jimmy Carter said he could not have undertaken the duties of the presidency at 80 years old. Why are you so sure that you can?
Because I've watched it. I know what the job is. I've been engaged. Look, one of the reasons I'm running
Biden's getting the same question.
Of my age and my experience. With it comes wisdom. We need someone to take office this time around who on day one can stand on the world stage, command the respect of world leaders from Putin to our allies,
To pardon himself.
know exactly what has to be done to get this country back on track. It is required now more than any time in any of our lifetimes to have someone who has that capacity.
That's the thing. They don't understand what respect is. Respect doesn't mean just handing, various people a bunch of money or giving them military welfare or giving money to every single country on earth. That's not respect. People will take advantage of that, but they don't respect you for it. This pathetic approach of let's see if we can just buy allies by giving them more and more money and basically being their military so they can spend all their money on socialism. It's not gaining respect. It's just gaining us enemies at most and turning us into a laughingstock at best.
But let's look at Biden's motives here. I mean, what makes anybody think that Biden really cares about America? All he cares about is just, hey, elect him so his friends and family can sell access to the White House. They got a good thing going, and they want it back. They had a good thing going. They want it back. They're like mob bosses. What is it that he really cares about? He's a con man. From the last con artist administration. I mean, he's left over from the Obama administration. He wants to go back. And we already know what they were doing last time. They were, he's putting his relatives were selling access. That's clear. And that's clear. That's what's been going on. And that's what all these people want. Is they want the spot so they can sell the access and make all this money, because they've been making all this money. They're all senators. They all want to talk about what they're going to do as president. We already know what they're going to do as president. They're already in the Senate. They already have a voting record. They've been selling us out the whole time. The whole time. That's what they're going to do as president.
Every single one of them has been increasing spending. Obama increased spending. Trump has increased spending. And the simple fact is, before we say oh man, Republicans and Democrats are so dumb, Gary Johnson increased spending. We need to stop supporting people who increase spending. The correct thing to do is to cut government. That means spend less. If you're spending more, you are not fit for this job.
Here's the new question. What do you say to Democratic primary voters who think a candidate under age 70 is more likely to defeat Trump? Trump himself is in his 70s. Most of the Democratic candidates on the stage are retirement age. They're a completely different generation. There are only a couple of young candidates on the stage, Tulsi Gabbard and Pete Buttigieg. What would you say? Do you think age is a factor that some of the candidates are too old to run?
I mean, I think one of the probably most important ways to look at that is, Biden's, he's near the end of his life. Whatever changes he makes, he's only going to have to live with them for a few years. Whereas I know I'm going to have to live with them for at least 40 something years, maybe more or less. I think the younger the person is, the longer they're going to have to live with these changes. And I think that's a really important factor.
But now here's the question. Dan, how old are you right now?
39.
Okay, and in that time period, you have had more legitimate jobs, more legitimate real jobs, not political nonsense fake jobs, than Bernie has in his 70 plus years of life. That's what I'm talking about. It's not a question of age. It's a question of what have you done in that time. And if you see somebody that has lived their entire life in not real jobs, in government jobs, in political jobs, that's evidence. I don't think that age is very significant over here, but I do think that what you've done with your life matters. And the fact that you have all these people on there who've gone from being prosecutors to politicians to a different type of politician to a third type of politician, that's a problem. These are not people who have any interest in being part of the real marketplace. They just want to be overlords because that's all they've ever done with their entire lives.
It's clear what Bernie would do as president. He would spend. That's what he does. He votes to spend. Because
he's no tomorrow.
He's a socialist operative. He visited Russia way back in the early days of when he got started. And he wants to break the bank. He wants to bankrupt the United States. That's his socialist dream. That's how they want to kill capitalism. And they use these social issues to try to guilt trip us all into it. And the goal is to break the bank. The goal is to bankrupt us. That's the goal.
Now they're going
But then in what way is this capitalism when you have 100% of people using some kind of welfare being forced into it or just buying into it? How is this capitalism?
Yeah, I was going to say, we need to get away from this whole. I had this conversation with somebody the other day, and they were like, "Yeah, I'm all socialism, so screw your campaign." And I'm like, "Well, what is socialism?" And he couldn't even define it except for the opposite of capitalism, and that's not true at all. Socialism is. It's a system of sharing things socially. It's usually implemented with some authoritarian system. Capitalism doesn't require an authoritarian system to be implemented, which is why there's such thing as free market capitalism. Arguably, you could say we have tyrannical capitalism or something. It's still a lot like socialism because we're being forced to share in all kinds of social structures. But the socialism and capitalism are not opposites, and we need to kind of stop saying it like it is. There's authoritarianism and there's non-authoritarianism, and capitalism works sometimes under both. It works much better without authoritarianism. Socialism requires authoritarianism, and that's why it always fails, because it's got all these great things that they want to give to people, but at the end of the day, there are people who don't want to participate in that, so it requires the use of more force to get everybody to participate, and then you have people resisting, and then you need more force to back that up, and then the next thing you know, you're not spending money on any of these government programs to help people. You're spending all this money on fighting the resistance that doesn't want to participate in what's become a police state, and that's why it always fails. It's not because socialism has bad intentions. It's just because it requires so much force to force everybody to participate in it in the same way.
And that's why the only countries that... Oh, sorry, go ahead, Max.
I think that another, not to go off on a segue, but this age issue that Tulsi answered and Peter Buttigieg answered and Biden answered and Bernie Sanders answered, it brings up another question. Biden has been in there for 40 years. He's been a career politician for over 40 years. In fact, he's been a career politician longer than any of us have been alive. And this makes a case in my mind for term limits. I think that, you shouldn't serve more than maybe 12 years in Congress. And if you can't get done everything that you want to get done in 20 years, some of these guys have been in for 30 and 40, and some of them are 45 years now.
The thing is, Max, sometimes the enemy is more numerous, and
time to throw in the towel.
It's going to take Dr. Paul was in Congress for a long time, and he still didn't get it done, not because there's something wrong with Ron Paul, but he just had a lot of opposition. So I'm not really as in favor of term limits as a lot of folks are.
I think there's a poll on isidewith.com that maybe 90% of libertarians support term limits. I think 80% of Americans now support term limits.
I bet if you change that question to like, would you support term limits on Dr. Ron Paul? They would be like, no.
Yeah. I mean, there is a certain vein of logic there. You know, but if there was term limits, none of these guys like Biden and all Bernie, they wouldn't even be over. They wouldn't even be in this. You know, if there was limits, you know. So.
Well, remember that Dr. Paul, Congressman Ron Paul, supports term limits.
But also, this is kind of a pass the responsibility kind of thought here. Like, why are we making it the state's responsibility to regulate the state? We, the voters, need to stop re-electing these people. Like, I don't know what is wrong with the people of Vermont, you know, to where they would want to elect Bernie Sanders repeatedly as a senator. I don't know what. Max, you live closer to Vermont than I do. Is Vermont something going on there that's just spectacular that, you know?
Yeah, Vermont's a beautiful state. I don't care for their political system, but I mean, I don't care for our some of the people in our state legislature in New Hampshire either. There's a lot of corrupt politicians down at the state level, and it's one of the reasons I ask other libertarians to run for state legislature. It's completely winnable. In 2016, we had 28 different legislative races where our candidates won more than 25% of the vote, and some won over 30%. One won 39%. Three-way partisan legislative races. They're not super duper expensive. And Democrats are back on. Here comes the good one.
Welcome back to the CNN New York Times Democratic presidential debate. Mark Lacey from the New York Times starts off our questioning. Mark.
Let's turn to the growing concerns over the power of big tech companies. Mr. Yang, Senator Warren is calling for companies like Facebook, Amazon, and Google to be broken up. Is she right? Does that need to happen?
As usual, Senator Warren is 100% right in diagnosing the problem.
Bullshit.
There are absolutely excesses in technology.
There we go. Like we have 4 people here, and I'm sure that all of us have been banned or shadow banned or ad banned from Facebook, right? At some point.
Yeah, we're
able to stand up and say, I mean, one of the reasons I've been active as much on Facebook lately is because Facebook has competitors. A lot of great stuff is going on Discord where there's a higher level of privacy, so you can plan more elaborate things without, you know, any kind of social or governmental or Facebookal oversight. I mean, there is a free market here. No one says you have to use Facebook. You can use their many competitors. And the idea that we can't, that's a shortcoming in their ability to imagine things. The simple fact is this: imagine if somebody a couple decades ago said, you know, MySpace is taking over too much. Like everybody has a MySpace page. And at the time, yeah, maybe everybody did, but then they were defeated. And that's what happens in the tech world. You have an idea, it works for a while, you don't make it good enough, somebody comes with something better. And I don't think that Facebook is going to be this like permanent fixture in social media. I think it's going to be replaced by better alternatives.
Yeah, but you also have like all these okay, so they say like these giants, right? Like Google and Facebook. So there's like what, 5 of them, and none of them are exactly monopolies. A lot of them are offering a lot of the same services. When you look at Amazon and Google, there's a lot of overlap. When you look at Facebook and Twitter and all these, there's a lot of overlap. But what's stupid is like, so they're already competing. How many do you need? Are you going to cut them in half and now you've got twice as many? Is that enough, or do you need to cut them into 1,000 pieces? What if, you know, then you have this problem, oh my God, they're all like, I got separated onto a different Facebook. I'm on Facebook A and all my friends are on Facebook B. What, like, how do you, this is stupid.
Well, and the real irony here is if you actually look at who is restricting choice, it's the Democrats and Republicans. They're restricting the ballot to 2 choices. The tech world, how many different search engines are there? Dan, even you, as much as you know about computers and whatnot, I don't think you know how many search engines there are, but I know that you know there's hundreds, thousands, maybe millions. I mean, how many different app marketplaces are there? How many different places are there to buy a book? I mean, how many different ways are there to connect with your friends? The number is nearly endless. How many social media competitors are there? The Democrats and Republicans, they're saying, oh, 2 is way more than enough choices for politics. But for social media, which literally doesn't matter at all, we need 55,000 because the 54,000 that we have is not enough.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. When are they going to break up the 2 big parties? Those 2 parties are too big, and there's only 2 of those.
break them up into 6 or 8 different political parties. But you know what? I got to say this. Historically, other than the De Beers diamond monopoly, there really haven't been any monopolies or trusts that have managed to hold up for very long without using government to block trade, block free trade, using licensing schemes. Like I had a bill in to open up utilities, to open up broadband internet to free market competition. They're using collusion with city and town governments to block competition, so you only have 1 or 2 internet service providers in any specific market. There have been 23 states that were successful at opening up the utilities market to competition, and they all were successful at bringing down their utility rates. In the 1970s and early 80s, they deregulated the airlines market, and the airlines market has succeeded in getting costs down, and there are a lot of low-cost carriers, and there are a lot of first-class options. There's a lot more choices now than there used to be, and you can send packages next day, which you couldn't do in the 1970s because they were still regulating everything to death. So it's government collusion in healthcare. It's big pharma using patent abuse and the FDA's approval process to keep competing products out. Almost everywhere where you see monopolies and trusts operating for any length of time, they're always using the government to block competition, and that's corrupt, rent-seeking behavior. And it's one of the things that really makes libertarians different, and I think makes libertarians better, is that we're pro-market. We're not pro-business or pro-bank or pro-labor or pro any one group or another. We're pro-market. We're for free market competition. And realistically, you don't see a lot of monopolies. I don't think Facebook is going to last very long as a monopoly. It continues censoring and banning and blocking people the way it has been.
There's another conspiracy open right here in front of us, where a major media company is conspiring with the Democrat Party to take out one of its primary competitors because they are upset because they are losing viewership. And the Democrat business model relies on keeping everybody divided, and they aren't doing well in this environment where everybody's talking on social media and the truth is getting out. And now some of their people, are being exposed. They don't like it. They don't want one side of the country they want to keep everybody divided. Like that's how they operate. And that's the motive here. And they're basically plotting another crime about how they're going to take down this company. And the reality is if they were really that interested in breaking apart Facebook or one of these other companies, they would become shareholders. They would go to the shareholder meeting and they would vote to do something like that. But they don't want to put their money where their mouth is. They want to use ours.
And the simple fact is when you have what we're seeing right now is while CNN and Fox are talking about how much we need to protect the Kurds that shares literally 0% of our values, it's only social media that's been talking about the Hong Kong protests, people that share 100% of our values. I mean, that's the kind of information control. And yeah, I'm not sure where all the different media organizations that are supporting the Democrat debate tonight, I know there's quite a few of them, but those are the ones that would benefit if there was no Facebook.
Yeah, this is thuggery. They are conspiring and colluding right in front of us. If this is what the mafia does. They get together. They unionize and take over the unions. And we're gonna thug over all these local businesses and stuff. That's exactly what they're doing, and they're doing it openly in front of the American people. This is what the mafia does, and this is obviously what the Democrat Party has become. They've become, taken over, consumed by a mafia-like mindset where they're just going to thug everybody over to get what they want.
More likely, because the companies won't be able to work together to fight it. Could breaking up these companies make the spread of disinformation worse?
No, I don't agree with that at all. And serving on the Senate Intelligence Committee, working
mainstream media does the disinformation. I mean, you saw in the last election how much they tried their best to ignore Gary Johnson. Now, listen, I know I have my differences with Gary Johnson, but the idea that he was not politically significant is simply false. And the result of their own nonsense lack of decent reporting was that most of the major media got their predictions wrong because they ended up believing their own political lies. The basic fact is this: the mainstream media today is the source of disinformation and misinformation. Look at their just nonsensical lack of coverage of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, where we basically haven't seen any of the consequences, none of the capture. none of that's been shown to us the way it was
recently. ABC's video that they took from that Kentucky gun range and then put it up as video of stuff going on in Syria. Video from a gun range in Kentucky. ABC used. Did you guys see that?
Yeah, I saw the buzz.
It's like literally a basic level lie, and they're using that to spread policy. And if it wasn't for social media, that information would have stood.
It's propaganda.
Has anyone seen that movie Wag the Dog?
Yeah.
It's exactly like that. It's fucking insane. And sometimes they'll go on location to where the actual fighting is going on, and they'll, get some good glamour shots and bring them home to spin it to whatever narrative they want. But that's what they're doing.
And all three of you are 100% right. In fact, I have there's a Facebook page called The Media Lies, and every once in a while I'll see just the media gets caught, CNN gets caught staging a story, ABC just got caught with that one we were talking about, the gun range where people are firing machine guns at the gasoline drums and causing explosions, and they ran the same video and they said, here's all this fighting going on in Syria and all the people are getting killed, and they didn't have anyone on the ground in Syria, so they came up with they find another video that they can put up. But they've been caught several times doing that. They've been caught over and over and over again. And people are sharing this. There's an online poll. Hate to bring up polling again. Only 23% of Americans now trust the mainstream media to report things truthfully and accurately. It's almost half of Democratic voters, but it's almost none of Republicans, independents, libertarians, even the Green Party. They don't trust the media to tell the truth. Nobody trusts the media to tell the truth except for...
I think the Democrats' numbers may be even lower than the media, and that's why they're conspiring together right now to commit a criminal act under the color of government and the color of law. They've conspired at least 2 serious criminal acts. If we were doing that, that would be considered serious crime. We would go to prison for many, many years. Federal prison. I mean... this is unbelievable.
Senator Klobuchar, let me bring you in here. Your response.
I'm not finished.
Yes, you are.
What I'm saying is that it seems to me that you would be able to join me in saying the rule has to apply to Twitter the same way it does to Facebook.
Look, I think all of the rules should apply.
Why is the government dictating these platforms and...
The irony of it is this: if all the Democratic candidates simply left Facebook to join MeWe, Discord, Minds, take your pick, that in that act, they would destroy Facebook. Just those candidates would by themselves destroy Facebook because Facebook would no longer be the center of a big part of political action. So they could do it. They're choosing not to. They'd rather find some more way to take more tax money, to enforce more nonsense, create more fake government jobs of now the Facebook police. It's preposterous.
They've already chosen their new platform. It's CNN and Fox News and CNBC. And, all
and they would love to be back in those old days when a single narrative could be controlled to favor, whatever special interests are controlling the Democrats and Republicans right now. I mean, that's what they want. Social media has been disruptive. I mean, it has its shortcomings certainly, but it has been disruptive of their agenda.
Yeah, have they even gotten together on Facebook or Twitter to do anything like what we've done or what we've been doing at all?
Nope.
Not once?
I mean, they promote their own events on their own, but they haven't done any kind of... Like, the only thing I've seen where they do, 2 candidates or more are these big debates that are on CNBC or whatever.
Yeah. That's why they want to regulate it.
They don't cooperate because they're just kind of in it for themselves. They're all career politicians.
True too.
And I think that establishment Democrats and establishment Republicans are basically the same opportunistic politicians, and they just look at when their buddies get them to go run for a legislature or run for county office. They say, okay, well, look at the PVI number of your district. Okay, this district leans Democrat. Okay, well, now you're a Democrat. You're a lifelong Democrat all of a sudden.
Well, notice that they're not talking about breaking up Fox or CNN or... They're not talking about... Are they too big?
That's because they're owned by the same billionaires that own these politicians.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's like the equivalent of like, you know, Facebook has the same Facebook platform, but it's like you go to facebook.com or bookface.com and it's all the same data, but it's a different domain name. That's kind of like the difference between, you know, all these companies being owned by the same person and just having, oh yeah, but it's on channel 3 and channel 4 and channel 7.
And it's that singular narrative. I mean, what's been really telling for me actually has been Fox's coverage of Trump pulling out of Syria, because usually you're just like, oh, Fox just wants to support Republicans, or you know, no matter what. But we can see that they're more interested in supporting the military-industrial complex because they're saying that this horrible, backwards people. I mean, the Kurds are a backwards, terrible group of people. That we need to be there, risking American lives to protect them, and they're talking about all these terrible things that are happening. But the simple fact is, they're more interested in supporting the military-industrial complex than even supporting the Republican Party. I mean, that's what they're about.
Have the Democrats mentioned anything about breaking up the military-industrial complex?
Nope.
They're not too big,
Apparently.
but Facebook's too big.
Yeah.
If states prevail on restricting abortion, what's your plan to stop them? Is that even, do you really want to have a federal government that has the power to basically
be involved?
Laws? Is this not a states' rights issue? The 10th Amendment says that anything that all powers not reserved to the federal government are reserved to the states and to the people respectively. Some of the worst problems that we're running into on drug policy, on alcohol policy, on transportation, and how our schools work are due to the federal government overstepping its authority and pushing a top-down, one-size-fits-all solution on everyone. And the federal government should, in my opinion, mind its own business, get government out of everything, let the states decide for themselves. Just as Ron Paul used to say, he's pro-life. However, he respects the 10th Amendment, and if people are going to go across state lines, they're going to go across state lines. That 10th Amendment effectively makes America a pro-choice country, and if you're gonna honor your constitutional oath, honor the 10th Amendment.
In your race for president, you actually said,
yeah, it shouldn't even be a federal issue.
Then you tried to dial it back, and you said you wanted to put doctors in jail. That is exactly what the Alabama law is. It put doctors in jail for 99 years. You, Donald Trump, are not on the side of women. You are not on the side of people of this country.
Did Donald Trump sign a law to put people in jail for 99 years?
Roe v. Wade on the book.
Over
90%.
Just listen, like,
they're misdirecting the blame. Isn't this something that happened in what was it, Alabama or some state?
Yeah, they said if you leave the state to get an abortion and then come back, then it. Oh wait, why was she talking about doctors going to jail? Because that was I think the person would get. I don't know.
Yeah, and so I mean they passed really draconian laws against abortion, and to me this is an example of, I mean, look at the nature of this choice. This is an intensely personal choice, an intensely difficult part of somebody's life, and there are people you should turn to. If you're considering, there are people you should turn to. If you're religious, you should turn to leaders of your faith. If you have a family, you should turn to people in your family. If you have friends, you should talk to your friends. The only person you should not turn to for such a complicated decision is the state. The ham-fisted, one-size-fits-nobody state. And the idea that people who are doctors should be locked up, I mean, that's nonsensical. And this is me. I mean, as most of you guys know, I am opposed to abortion. I don't think it's the right thing to do. I don't think it's ever the right answer. But I don't think that me forcing that using violence is the right solution.
This is kind of unrelated, but I guess it could be kind of related. I was watching this movie today, and this guy goes up to it's like African tribes. So he goes up to, you know, the elder who's the most knowledgeable, and he says, "What should I name my son? Should I name it after a person or after a thing?" And the elder says, "Is it your child?" And he says, "Yes, my child." "Are you sure? Are you sure that your wife hasn't been unfaithful?" "Yes, I'm sure it's my child, of course." Then he says, "Well, then this is not my problem. I have more important things to do." I think that's like, you know, when you talk about like this isn't a federal government's issue, that's it right there. They do have more. I mean, if any of us are elected president, we have more important things to do than deal with something that, because if abortion is murder, then even murder is a state issue. Like the federal government doesn't go around prosecuting murders. That's what the state governments are for. The federal government is supposed to deal with disputes between states and foreign invasions, and that's pretty much it. It's very limited in that. That's what state governments are for, and this isn't what the federal government or a president should be concerned with. It's not, I mean, not to say it's not a problem, but it's not our problem. There are federal issues that are supposed to be taken care of, and this is not one of them.
Get in a court packet. We had 3 justices. Next time around, we lose control. They had 3 justices. We began to lose any credibility for the court has at all. I want to point out that the justices I've supported,
would you seek to add justices? Would you seek to add justices to the Supreme Court to protect women's reproductive rights?
Make sure that we move and insist.
By what means?
We codify.
Listen to how they phrase that, to protect women's reproductive rights, when really what they're after is not the right to reproduce, it's the right to not reproduce.
Well, the whole question is, what do they want to do to the Supreme Court under the auspices of, or the guise
they want to politicize it.
They want to add positions, more justices.
They want justices to legislate from the bench and to politicize the Supreme Court and to be able to take the laws that we have and turn them into something else by putting somebody there who has a political bias.
If these Democrats really cared about these issues, they'd be telling people to be fighting at the state level, because that's where it's happening at. And they want to try and act like something's going to go on the federal level. If they really cared, they'd be educating people and telling them to fight on the state level. What's wrong with these people? They're just a bunch of hustlers.
Well, if you tell them to fight it on the state level, then there's no reason to elect them, right? So, I mean, this is, again, it's a manipulation tactic. They're trying to, you need to get me elected president so that I can put people on the Supreme Court who are going to change Roe versus Wade. Like, that's what they're selling you, and it's not even a reality of
become so distracted by lining their pockets that they don't even have any good ideas. Have they presented one good idea this evening?
They presented one idea this evening, which is more government. And that idea is wrong. I mean, it's time for us to work to end the welfare state, to roll back the government. And when it comes to something like this, I mean, you can't, if you're going to say the government should legislate everything, provide for everything, steal from people for everything, you can't be that surprised when people start legislating their morality. And sometimes somebody else's morality is different from yours. Government should not legislate morality at all. I mean, Thoreau said it best when he said, imagine if government just dealt with issues of expedience, like what side of the road to drive on, and didn't even touch issues of conscience. That, to me, is what government should do. If anything, it should not be involved in issues of conscience. Conscience is not a state issue. It's not a local issue. Certainly not a federal issue. It is an individual issue, and it is only an individual issue.
And that's why the
Why do I get the impression that the media is driving the debate here? I mean, who picked all these questions? Where did they come from? Who's driving this agenda?
Probably the DNC.
Same 15 billionaires who own the media and own all the Democrats and rhinos, because they're all pushing the exact same agenda and have been for years. Now the question is, would you seek to add justices to the Supreme Court to protect women's reproductive rights? Okay, that's a rehash of the same question. And I would say, as president or in any position to appoint justices, I wouldn't make abortion, either repealing Roe v. Wade or keeping Roe v. Wade, a litmus test. Harry Brown had the best litmus test of all. He said, can you read? Can you read the Constitution? The Bill of Rights is absolutely clear. It's clear word for word. And there's absolutely no reason for Congress to be getting out of control like this. The U.S. Supreme Court is supposed to step in and rule some of these unconstitutional laws as unconstitutional, and prevent them from becoming the law of the land. So,
if you can't get the Patriot Act knocked down by the Supreme Court, a clear and obvious violation of the Fourth Amendment by
Brett Kavanaugh. By Brett Kavanaugh.
Okay, let's say they're talking about filling a vacancy, though, a legitimate filling a vacancy right now. Who you guys want to fill the vacancy?
Judge Napolitano.
I mean, let's have an honest. Napolitano, that's a popular choice among libertarians. You know, I mean, have any of them even named a potential person that would be good as a Supreme Court justice? You know, how come they're not having a conversation of who we'd like to see?
I think, well, this goes back to, you brought up where these questions coming from. And we have to remember, like, these debates that we're watching right now, these are put on by the DNC. This isn't like the people want to know. This is the Democrats want to know. Sorry, the DNC wants to know, and they want the Democratic voting base to know the answers to these questions. They're not asking them questions that they can't answer. How do you deal with such and such that's, you know, a policy that Democrats hate? How do you deal with the negative consequences of all the welfare problems? They're not asking them those questions. They're asking them questions that they can easily answer that make them look good, because this is a Democrat Party primary, and that's where all these questions are coming from. And that's why their entire thing is, like, when you go in for, let's say, an interview, right? Let's say there's an actor in a movie and he goes in for an interview, like on the Tonight Show. What do? They prepare the questions ahead of time, and they say, okay, we're going to ask these questions. Is there anything that you want me to ask you so that I can ask like I'm curious? Oh yeah, by the way, let me tell you the story. There's a new movie coming out, blah, blah. That's how these things are created and planned, and that's exactly what they're doing here, because these questions are not there to catch any of these candidates off guard. Maybe a couple of them who aren't liked by the you know, the insiders at the party, but this is all planned and constructed to work that way. So there's a very specific reason they're not being asked questions that you might be wondering why they didn't ask.
They're leading the witnesses.
Warren and Sanders attract the kind of voters Democrats need to beat Trump. Well, the visions of change offered by Warren and Sanders, which I mean assumes democratic socialism, attract the kind of voters Democrats need to beat Trump. I'll give a quick answer. 64% of Democratic voters in a poll said that they would rather go to live in a completely socialist country with everything nationalized, you know, like the Soviet Union or Cuba or North Korea, a country where everything is nationalized and controlled by the government, than to have a country where everything is privatized and you live under free market capitalism. They asked Republican voters, 87% of Republican voters, of course, said they would rather live in free market capitalism. But independent voters, an even larger percentage, 91%, about the same as Libertarian Party members. 91% said they would rather live in a free market capitalist country with everything privatized. Independent voters are the most fiscally conservative. They're the most socially libertarian group of voters. They're the most libertarian on foreign policy, and they are more committed to free markets and less government. They're more fiscally conservative, and they favor smaller government than either Republicans or Democrats. That's ironically where our voting base is.
So basically what you're saying, Max, is that these Democrats are really out of touch with the American people.
And then some. I mean, a lot of the Democrat politicians I work with in the legislature are, some of them are closet socialists and communists, and a lot of them are just openly socialist, and a few have been openly communist. It's not just the Democrat politicians themselves. It's the union officials. It's a lot of these Marxist college professors. There are a lot of socialists and communists in the law profession, which is why the trial lawyers are the Democrat Party's largest political contributors. Basically looking at a lot of, I mean, if you go to the Communist Party's website, you see them echoing all the same things that the Democrats are saying, and that Fox, Daily Kos, Mother Jones, you know, NPR, New York Times, CNN, they're all kind of saying the same things. It's just a matter of how abrasive and how divisive each group is. But the talking points are the same. The policies are the same. Someone told me years and years ago in the Libertarian Party that the Republicans were basically socialists and the Democrats were communists. And I haven't seen a whole lot of evidence to the contrary on that.
I don't know, Max. If you actually look at what people say they want, like, yeah, everyone wants to say, like, yeah, I'm going to be responsible and all this kind of stuff. But the simple fact is, some of the most toxic socialistic programs in America still have a lot of support. And it's our job, I believe, to fight that support, to educate people, to show people that those programs are morally wrong. They're destructive to individual character. They're the reverse of actually achieving anything that we want. The classic one of those, of course, is government schools. Government schools are currently politically popular, even among people who say they don't like socialism, even though those are by any definition of socialism.
But it's a bait and switch.
How's that a bait and switch? We're going to start steal money from your neighbor to pay for
not us. I'm saying that the government is committing essentially a bait and switch here. They bait people with this idea of schools and education, but they don't really care, because what we've got currently isn't that impressive, has been on a downhill slope for decades, ever since the federal government got involved in education. They need to get out of it. That's what needs to happen. If these people are running for a federal office, this agency didn't exist but a few decades ago.
Here's my point, Ben, is that we can either be for socialism or against socialism. In 2016, Matt Kuehnel got booed on the stage when he's talked about Medicare for all. At the same time, I would bet the vast majority of people, even in that room, in the heart of the libertarian movement, would support public school education for all. Those two are the same thing, politically speaking. The fact is, we have been lax in our opposition to socialism. And if we're not going to fight socialism, we can't be super surprised when Democrats and Republicans don't either. We're supposed to be the vanguard. And I do believe that as the vanguard, we have failed over the last several years. In the past, with great leaders like Ron Paul and Harry Brown speaking openly against government schools, I think we were absolutely at the vanguard. But in 2016, we were not. In 2012, we were also not. In 2008, we were not. We have been dropping that ball. I think we need to pick it up and really fight against all forms of socialism, fight those ideological fights, do some of the stuff that Dan does with the taxation and stuff, and say that this is wrong, socialism is wrong, theft is wrong, and we're going to stand against it.
Well, they've socialized education. It's there. It's there, and that's what they're talking about. Is they want more money for their programs, and they're not even producing results. It'd be one thing if they were producing results that were better than ever. I mean, these are unbelievable results.
They are.
Maybe they'd have a leg to stand on.
I think they are producing results. They're just not the results that we want. And I was thinking about this today. You have state mandated school until you're 18. And when you look at the age of people who are kind of willing to rebel and willing to question authority, that's kind of that. Why is it that, I mean, if you think about it, a lot of school is wasted. Like a lot of it, they teach you nonsense, things you're not going to use in the real world, things that most people don't care to learn and they're going to forget anyway. Why do they spend so much time focusing on that for this long when you can learn all that stuff in half the time? If you let students learn at their own pace and learn things that they're interested in. And then I start looking at like what a lot of kids are going through, where the ones that are being rebellious, they have that just beaten out of them. Now they're giving them like all kinds of drugs. Oh, you have ADHD. You have all this, oh, he's rebelling. Oh, he has problems with authority. Let's get him medicated. Let's punish him. Let's do whatever we can to beat the rebel out of him so that he will comply with everything that authority tells him, so that as soon as he gets out of school, he's not going to be a problem for the government. He's not going to question the government's authority. He's not going to resist them. They're not going to create an uprising. And I was thinking about this, looking at, some other countries like Hong Kong. I mean, look at that, right? You have an authoritarian government trying to come in, and you have people who are willing to go to the streets and resist. And I would think a lot of Americans used to be like that. And we see people going out and protesting for some little things here and there. But where is this American spirit of, no, we're not going to pay your taxes. You're not going to control me. You're not going to tell me what to do. You're just my government. That's all you are. You're for police for real crimes, and you're for courts, and you're for resolving disputes and enforcing contracts, and that's it. Where did all this other crap come from, and why are we so willing to just lay down and take it? And I think it's because of what they're teaching us in schools and how they're trying to control the kids. And I think that is the result. You're talking about results. I think that is the result, but that's the result that they want. It's not the result we want, but they're getting the desired result.
And when did Americans do flying kick against a police officer? That was a pretty impressive video. I shared that at the first opportunity. What the new question is, what is the right vision for a Democrat to beat Trump? And I think that's pretty obvious that the vast majority of working class voters. I talked to a friend of mine, Al Baldessaro. He's a current member of the State House. He's a Republican, and he came from a Democrat family. His whole family was Democrat at one time. And he said, you know, back in the day, who knows how many years ago, 50 years ago maybe, the Democrat Party was the party of the working class. They were concerned about working class issues, and none of them are doing anything anymore except just talking about divisive social issues and throwing a red herring out there. And one of the things I keep hearing at the union hall or on the job site, I work with other blue collar guys, is the Democrats don't do anything for the working class anymore. So if you abandon your base is going to say, why should we vote for you so you can fly around in your private jets lecturing us about gun control and climate change, and constantly talking down to us and repeating the same talking points that these Marxist college professors are pushing. Why don't you just go in and do the job and take care of injured workers and stop cutting Social Security benefits and stop cutting Medicare benefits to pay for Obamacare and stop paying for all these big government social engineering programs? Why? I think it's pretty much hopeless at this point. Most of the working class base, most blue collar workers either stay home or they vote Republican. There are very, very few blue collar voters, certainly those who pay attention, very few who still vote Democrat. I think that that's hopeless. Among the independent voters, they're very fiscally conservative, more fiscally conservative than Republican voters. I don't think that the Democrat Party is going to last much longer. The only way they can whip up votes is through larger and larger scale voter fraud. Is political revolution what the American people want? It sounds like a segue from the previous question.
The simple fact here is that the working class, young people used to be part of the working class. I mean, there was a time when the average 23-year-old or even 19-year-old or even 17-year-old had a job. I mean, they weren't just, you know, grad students in social justice studies. They were doing things. And this sort of new approach where the idea is that you should try to delay adulthood as long as humanly possible is leading directly to this kind of laziness. I mean, we are culturally seeing that you have a working class that still exists that has nothing to do with the university class, which is only interested in pushing a socialistic agenda.
Well, they're talking about political revolution, and I think so. I mean, isn't that why we're here running as libertarians? I think we want a political revolution that's outside of the paradigm. A political revolution, I don't even know if they understand the nature of the question that they're discussing. A political revolution does not involve them, the status quo. That involves something like us, the third parties, rising up to replace the status quo. We do need a renaissance in political thought, and people do need to get involved more locally, which is where a lot of the taxation and a lot of the fight really is. They have us so distracted on issues as if some of these issues were federal issues, like the abortion issue. They're not telling people the truth to get involved and to go to their state houses and to testify and to go fight the fight for whatever cause that they allegedly believe in or that they're pandering to, in their debates there. We are the political revolution. We'll see. I guess we'll see in 2020 what the meter there is for real political revolution, because they sure don't represent revolution.
I mean, revolution is revolution against the political class. The political class cannot lead that revolution. You know, the government contractors, the military-industrial complex, the welfare state, that is what you would do the revolution versus. That cannot be the revolution. You know, what we're seeing over here is an attempt to try to just jam people's minds full of total nonsense, to clutter up your thinking with stuff that has nothing to do with any real facts. You know, we talked about how the media is trying to control the narrative in this. Imagine this. Imagine if the question was something like, how do you feel about the forced marriages happening in Kurdish Syria? How do you feel about the honor killing that are part of Kurdish Syrian culture? I mean, that would change the narrative quite differently. By sort of curating this brand of non-relevant knowledge, they're controlling the outlook that people have. The great thing is that because of things that we're doing, things that are happening on social media and all of over other places, people are actually engaging in a real revolution, an intellectual revolution, a political revolution, an economic revolution. Bitcoin is part of that economic revolution. Homeschooling is part of that revolution. Social media, in some ways, has been part of that revolution. And that's what we really need to see, an actual revolution against the status quo, not a revolution in favor of the status quo.
So how can people get involved in homeschooling there locally? Is there any tips and tricks, what people can do? How can they take action?
There's so many different things. I mean, on vormethod.com, we put up information about, just general guidelines. There's so many great homeschooling communities in almost every state, but politically what we can do to help them is to repeal all the laws that are there designed to get in the way of homeschooling. Repealing all truancy laws. We need to get rid of those laws yesterday. Repealing any restrictions on private schools or homeschooling or anything like that. All those need to go. The free market is a measurement of how good, it's going to measure how good something is. We are living in an information age. And when you go to a homeschooling convention, you know what you see? Choice. So many choices, demos, books, computer programs, games, you name it. That's what education is supposed to look like in America. It's supposed to look like all this choice. And it's just a question of getting involved in your local homeschooling groups. We have groups in every state. Every state has groups that are helping people become homeschoolers. You don't need to be a religion. You don't need to have any particular religion or be an atheist. You can, whatever your culture is, there's something for you.
Politically speaking, do you happen to know where there's any fights going on right now, where the big battles are taking place, maybe on the state level or, what have you, that people could get involved in?
It's pretty much where you'd expect. Maryland is definitely a big one. California used to have really good homeschooling laws, but they're getting kind of reversed right now. New York, terrible. I mean, New York homeschooling laws are unbearably bad. New Jersey is absolutely terrible. Massachusetts is terrible. New Hampshire is fantastic. Connecticut is actually really good. So, I mean, there's the HSDLA, the Homeschooling Legal Defense Association, they have a map, and you'll see wherever the red areas are, the problem areas, that's where the fights are happening. We need to bring those fights to state legislators, county councils, whatever we need to do to make that easier for people to give better education to their own kids.
What was the name of that organization again?
The Homeschool Legal Defense Association.
That is homeschool, charter schools, school choice. That is one partisan issue where the teachers union officials and school administrators all weigh in and lean very heavily on Democrats. If you run as a Democrat, sometimes we get libertarians who will run as a Democrat, and they lean on them just like everyone else. And we did manage to get 25 Democrats in the New Hampshire House out of 160, managed to get 25 of them to support continued funding for charter schools. Now, before you say, hey, that sounds like big government, the charter schools cost $6,400 per year per student. The public schools run by the teachers unions and school administrators cost taxpayers $18,000 per year per student. And a lot of the kids who are going into the charter schools in New Hampshire would be borderline special ed. So you'd be looking at $30,000 to $60,000 a year per student. So what the teachers union officials and school administrators were trying to do is take all the charter school kids, just as they're trying to take the homeschooled kids, and they're trying to push them back into the public school system just for their own benefit. Next question is, what friendship have you had that would surprise us, and what impact has it had on you and your beliefs? This is drawing from Ellen going to a baseball game with George Bush Jr. I'll have to bail out in about 15 minutes because I've got another news interview that I've got to do pretty soon. But I'll give my answer is I'm friends with Republicans and Democrats and Libertarians in the state legislature. I've been longtime friends with people with whom I don't agree on anything. One of my best friends is a representative from Concord, former representative from Concord, and I don't think we've ever agreed on a single vote ever. I don't think that, as Thomas Jefferson used to say, I don't think that political differences is reason enough to break up a friendship.
I'm definitely with you on that, Max. I have many friends who are hardcore anti-fob black bloc type folk where they're opposed to all capitalism in all of its forms. I have friends that are political moderates. I have friends of all different things. And I think the key is that what makes friendships work is A, the ability to respect that people can have different views from you, and B, the willingness to listen. And I don't think that any of my friends would ever say that I'm not willing to listen to their political views for as long as they want to discuss them. I've listened to people's views for hours and learned something. I've really gained a lot from that. I think it's very valuable to have friends that have very different political views than you do. I think that challenges your views, helps you refine your own understanding, and sometimes it shows you where you were wrong. The simple fact is, I wasn't born in ANCAP. I thought anarcho-capitalism was insane, and it was by listening to somebody else that I got that I started to look at this totally different philosophy that I had initially dismissed out of hand.
Once you go ANCAP, you never go back.
Sure. Yeah, I'll say, meeting you guys and by getting involved in the Libertarian Party has had an impact on my life. It certainly has. We wouldn't be here right now doing this if we hadn't, met, by way of the Libertarian Party, of which, people should consider joining and getting more involved in. These Democrats. They're obviously con artists. They're obviously involved in several, really bizarre conspiracies here. It's time people, really do consider, getting involved in the Libertarian Party and using that as their vehicle for political change, because neither one of these parties represent genuine revolution.
For a cause larger than yourself. That's what we're doing right now.
None of them represent the people. They're all sneaky car salesman.
Yeah.
He's so much bigger than what.
I mean, what you're seeing are the enemies of the people. I mean, these are people that are willing to lock up people who've never hurt anybody, never done this, never stolen from anybody, never done anything to anybody. They're people who are willing to just take somebody's kids and force them into government school programs that don't work. These are people who are willing to steal from you to fund immoral campaigns overseas. The actions in Iraq and Afghanistan, those are immoral wars that should never have happened. That's who these people are. These people are the enemy. That's what the enemy looks like. The enemy always pretends to be your friend, and they're not your friends. They are the people who, through their actions, you can trust somebody's actions. They have lied to you. They have stolen from you. They have sent your kids to die overseas. Those are your enemies.
Think about it. Biden sends a bunch of people's kids to die overseas under the Obama administration. Meanwhile, where's he sending his kid to go make what, $50,000 a year as some board member in Ukraine? Think about that. Think about the difference there. And he wants to run for president.
So he can he can do more damage to people that he didn't, that are not his kids. And that to me is a major problem. Now listen, I'm the first person to say that if it's not your kid, you shouldn't have to pay for it. But just because somebody's not your kid doesn't mean you send them to die overseas in a pointless war. I mean, there is a balance there. Yeah, don't pay for somebody else's kid. I agree with that. But just randomly send them to some hellhole to die for no reason? Absolutely not. And that's why I think most of us are agreed that if we're elected, we're going to bring the troops home, end all these immoral foreign wars, shut down foreign military bases, and cut spending and cut taxes.
That would be my first act, is to bring the troops home from the Middle East.
During this time that Hunter Biden was on this board, Ukraine was in shambles. I mean, Donbass was getting shelled. Whole cities were getting shelled with artillery. It was a total war zone. And he's sitting there making $50,000 a month off the oil that's getting pumped out of the ground. Think about that. While Biden's sending other people's kids to other places in the Middle East, to die and
to get killed for $19,000 a year. Yeah.
And kill who, God knows who, when you drop those bombs. They don't have a name on them.
In Washington, D.C. Happened to be in the elevator with a Republican member of Congress, Will Hurd. And on a whim, I said, do you want to just rent a car and drive from San Antonio to Washington? And he called my bluff. We got in that Chevy Impala, last car on the lot. It was spring break. Drove 1,600 miles across the country.
What are they even talking about?
The conversation,
about how they're friends, bipartisan friends.
Finding out what we had in common. By the end of that trip, not only have we
have everything in common. They're in favor of socialism and militarism and welfare. What do they not have in common?
I just heard Will Hurd, and I went to see him because there was a libertarian who was running against him when I was in San Antonio, and I remember seeing Hurd talk. It was like he opened up by saying you should trust me, and I'm going to tell you why. I've worked for the CIA. I've been a spy. I've infiltrated other countries, basically telling us how he's a professional fraud, a professional liar, and how he's so good at it, and that's why we should trust him.
Yeah.
You're giving points for brazenness.
Across the aisle. I go to Bible study in Chairman Inhofe's office. He and I passed legislation together to help homeless and foster kids. I went out to try to invite every one of my Republican colleagues to dinner. And
Does he even sound sincere right now?
A restaurant agreeing on one with Ted Cruz was a very difficult thing. I'm a vegan and he's a meat-eating. But I'll tell you
I'm a vegan.
This is the moment in America that this is our test.
How do you know if your politician is a vegan? He'll tell you.
Think about our.
I bet you that wasn't even an honest statement.
Oh, I'm sure.
I'm sure he's just wrestling a chicken to the ground right now after the debate, just eating them live.
I don't even think that was truthful.
Gay man, a black woman, all of us on this stage are because we in the past are all inheritors of a legacy of common struggle and common purpose. This election is not a referendum on one guy.
Are they talking about us?
It's a referendum on who we are and who we must be to each other. The next leader is going to have to be one amongst us Democrats that can unite us all, not throw elbows at other Democrats that are unfair.
Friends with George. Divisiveness, right?
The leader.
When people start talking about uniting us all, what they mean is, if you disagree with me, shut the hell up.
Yeah.
And whenever you're here in DC, you listen to people talk about unity, unity, unity. Even in the Libertarian Party, when people talk about libertarian unity, it basically just means dissenters become silent. And I don't hold for that for a second. Politics is not about unity. It's never supposed to be about unity. It's supposed to be about disagreement. That's politics. If everybody is unified, that's conspiracy. I mean, we need to be disagreeing. I think that the idea that all Americans should have one single view, to me, that's nonsense. That's absolute nonsense. We are all different. Some of us, like Ben, want to go and help the Kurds. I don't want to. That's cool. Ben totally, I think that's great if Ben wants to help people do that. Some people like me wants to help the Hong Kong protesters just wreak all kinds of havoc on the Chinese government. I think that's fantastic. Other people might disagree. We're not supposed to be one people. We all like different foods. We like different books. We like different movies. We like different things. We have different political ideologies, and we should be able to explore those differences. That's what makes us great. Not some monolithic, simplistic, be one part of some gigantic Leviathan. We need to be different. We need to be separate. We need to be pursuing what matters to us.
I agree with that, but something, I don't know if you picked up on this, when this guy was just talking about unity, he basically said we need to come together as Democrats within this party. So he still wants to be divided with the Republicans. So yeah. even though they're using that like, oh, we should all get together and group hug everybody, it's like, yeah, except for those damn Republicans, we hate them.
Is unity not like contrary to freedom when you think about it?
It's for
all communist countries talk about unity a lot.
I mean, look, unity in terms of being diplomatic and being able to like coexist with everybody, I think is a great thing. But unity, Arvin's right. Unity, forcing everybody to think the same, forcing everybody to participate in the same retirement social security program. Yeah, that's at the
expense of liberty.
Yeah, that's antithetical to free choice.
Is that the price of unity? It comes in the form of liberty.
Unity, like everything else, has got to be voluntary. It shouldn't be forced, and it shouldn't be done by social pressure. It shouldn't be done by, the way cults operate, where you get excluded somehow or exiled somehow. It shouldn't be done at the end of a barrel of a gun or a threat of being thrown out or losing your job.
Because that certainly seems like what they're charging for this unity they speak of is liberty, money, taxes, freedom.
I do believe
we'll all get together and take money from the other people to spend it on our nonsense. I mean, that's the kind of nonsense that we're seeing here.
That's the unity they're selling.
Yeah, and here, I'm basically in between two Democrat states. I mean, I live in Maryland, right next to DC, both very, very far left-wing states. And what do we see? That through one way or another, they'll push their unity card, as in you can't disagree with us. Whether it's through social pressure, whether it's through using safe spaces to say if you disagree with us, you're violating our safe space. Whether it's through political pressure, whether it's through just threats and intimidation. I mean, once after Trump was elected, I wanted to see what it would be like to go around wearing a Make America Great hat through DC. And honestly, I chickened out because I was too afraid for my physical safety to carry out a social experiment, because the little things that I had seen of people who even seemed to be going that way had gotten such angry and borderline violent responses. Then later on, we saw actual violent responses that I was like, yeah, it might be an interesting social experiment, but it's not worth my life.
Okay, guys, I've got another interview starting right now, so I've got to bail. Hopefully one of you guys has a live feed so you can respond to their, I think they're just about to wrap up with their closing remarks anyway, but I'm sure you guys will have some awesome closing remarks, but I've got to switch over to another interview.
All right, cool.
Nice good, Max. See you, man.
Don't forget to mention us in that interview.
Yeah. Mention the debate. Or
different generation, different race, definitely different politics.
So does somebody have a live feed on right now? What are they saying? What nonsense are they spewing?
I don't.
I don't have a TV.
Okay. So why don't we ourselves move to our closing statements? I mean, what has been each of you guys' takeaways from this?
To stop voting for Democrats and Republicans. That's the takeaway. They just openly conspired to commit criminal acts, under the color of government. They want to be elected so they can commit, what basically amounts to serious criminal acts. They want to seize Putin's money. What was that other thing that they wanted to do?
Break up the big companies.
Yeah, they want to break up the big companies, the competition. They wanted to help.
Shut down CNN competition.
Yeah, where was this? Who was doing this debate? Was it MSNBC, CNN? Probably one of those two. Yeah. Sitting there colluding with.
Really, Microsoft. That's not a dangerous monopoly.
Yeah. They specifically want to go. They said Twitter and Facebook.
Yeah, the things that have been the most disruptive to their view. I mean, my takeaway has been this: we have basically an aggressive disinformation campaign going on. We have people who want us to be afraid of one group that we shouldn't be afraid of, allied to another group that we shouldn't be allied to. I mean, Kurdish culture is not something that we can in good conscience support. It is worse than Saudi Arabian culture. It is a very morally bankrupt and backwards culture. And we have no business supporting it, let alone forcing people to support it. I mean, Ben, to be honest, if you said you were going to fight alongside the Kurds, I would personally say, Ben, that is showing that you have moral shortcomings. That is not a good group.
I didn't say that I was going to go fight alongside.
No, I know you did. I'm saying, I know you said that people should be allowed to.
I know people that have, and so I'm saying that there are people out there who, and there's various different Kurdish groups there. It's not there's not the Kurds. There's not unity there either.
Not a single country.
The state doesn't need to be involved in this. That's what I'm saying. It's like, you know what? If people want to be involved in that, let them be involved in that. But why are we signing up the entire nation to be involved in that? What's the deal with that? Why can't people, if people want to?
So that's the thing, and they're tricking us into that involvement along with disinformation. I mean, the simple fact is this: if you ask the average person on the street about Kurds, half of the people I've talked to think that Kurds are like some type of Christian. The other half of the people have basically said that they're these really nice and kind and non-violent and non-oppressive people. I mean, that's just simply not true. This is a group of people that is practicing backwards and terrible things, human rights violations. They treat women, unbelievably badly. Forced marriages, underage marriages.
We have
things like that.
I mean, we have all kinds of scandalous stuff like this going on in our own country. I'm not going to point the finger and try to label the Kurds as one group of people that's guilty of a list of crimes. I'm sure that most people are just caught up in the middle of a bunch of thugs, just like we are over here. We're caught in the middle of these thugs, these Republicans and these Democrats. They're thugs. They're thugging on live television. The whole world's dealing with this, and a lot of the world's been stripped of their Second Amendment and is looking at us to hold out and keep the fight on. So somehow they can reacquire the basic right to defend themselves and not fall into a total government-sponsored protection racket. Because
here's what I really like. I mean, the stuff that Dan, that a lot of stuff that you talk about, and the stuff that you do, Dan, is you don't. It's not that you go and help cultures or groups fight against other people. You help individuals in those places become free of the backwards culture that they're around. And I think that's something that, to me, going to fight for individual Kurds against the backwards culture that they're stuck in, along with for their personal safety, I could see that as being fantastic. A lot of the stuff that you do, Dan, has been super inspiring to me in those areas where you go to all kinds of places where liberty is literally illegal to even talk about, and you spread the message. I mean, that's
Dan's done it.
Yeah, that's so powerful to me.
It is. There's taxation is theft, flags and stuff on how many continents?
Man, how many continents are the flags on? Those might only be on 2, but I mean, we've got some, like, there are people on social media all around the globe, and I know I've sent some T-shirts to like Australia and actually no, wait, hold on, I take that back. We just sent a flag to Hong Kong, so there's a taxation theft flag in Hong Kong.
You got photos yet? Or
on its way there? No, we just sent it like last week, so it might be a few more days.
And see, that's incredible. That's the kind of stuff, the boldness that you follow with has been so impressive to me, Dan, because you have correctly said that this is a moral issue. And yes, a lot of people don't recognize it as a moral issue, and fighting for that moral issue is hard, and saying that taxation is theft, a lot of times people will be like, oh, I don't know about that. That seems, but that's been so powerful. And you yourself have seen how much it's electrified people. It's electrified me. I'm supposed to be your competition, but I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. and so like that to me is what the kind of things that we need to be doing. We need to be fighting for the right ideology. We need to be fighting for our morality. We can't be saying, well, here's something that's not that bad, let's go with it. Bill Weld, I don't understand how he's any different as a prosecutor from the Democratic Party prosecutors that we're going after. I mean, it's the same thing in like not that different clothing. It's fighting for the truth, fighting, and not just saying, here's the most likely person to win, but here are the values that I'm willing to fight for.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think, looking at the Democrats and looking at the Republicans who are, I mean, they want to fight with each other, and it's all about control, and they don't want us in there muddying things up because they know we're going to tell people the truth. We're going to tell them that they don't need all this bullshit that the Democrats and the Republicans are selling them. I mean, you look at Democrats and you look at Republicans, and you have to realize they're two different people, right? Within one party, there's the voter, and then there's the politician. And it's like, I'll use a car salesman analogy, but it's like when a person walks into a Tesla dealership to buy a car from a dealer, both the buyer and the dealer like Tesla cars, but for completely different reasons. The dealer likes the cars because he's going to make some money off of it. The buyer likes the cars because he's going to receive the benefits of not having to buy gas or, whatever. They're two completely different interests, but the car salesman's the purpose is to make the buyer see all of the great things that he's going to benefit from buying this thing. And that's what the Democrats are doing. They're selling hopes and dreams to the Democratic voters as politicians so that they can receive the benefit, which is the paycheck from making the sale. And that paycheck might come in the form of power, or it might come in the form of big political contributions. But that's exactly what's going on there. And when you look at people like us, we're not up there. We're not trying to sell out and make $1 million donations from these corporations that we can squander and do whatever. We're not in this so that we can get power. We actually want to get in the car with the voter and drive home and live happily ever after in a nice, peaceful, voluntary society. That's what we want to do. And I think that's the main difference that people need to see between us and these huge political parties that are really just trying to sell them whatever they can so that they can take advantage, just like anybody else, just like the big corporations that they want to break up, that are just selling them whatever they can just to make some money and power.
They're like basically a pit of vipers. Imagine a viper pit, and they're like, unify with us. Who wants to unify with that? They're just a pit of snakes. That's what they are. They're not unified. They never have been.
When somebody tells you to unify, don't listen. Like, you have the right to be your own individual person. You don't need to shut up just because you disagree with some dominant group, whether it's a small group or a big group. Each of us has the natural right and a natural responsibility to pursue the things that mean something to us, to tell the truths that we feel and that we believe, not to kowtow to whatever dominant group is around or in power at that moment in time.
Exactly. Well, do we want to keep going, or do we want to close out?
Yeah, let's
wrap up.
Or, you know.
I was gonna say let's close this out because I got to get running. I didn't expect these Democrat debates to be so long, but I did the math on it. There was 12 of them, so that means they each get, with the moderators aside, they each get 5 minutes every hour to talk. Is.
Fortunately, we got a little bit more time like that. All right, guys, thanks a lot. I'm gonna check out too. But Dan and Ben, thanks so much for putting this together. It's I think we got some really great ideas out today.
Yeah, this was an awesome little reunion of our old debates.
Yeah,
so I'll see you guys soon at some of the upcoming conventions.
All right, see you guys.
All right, see ya.